Hi everyone, and welcome back to Coding with BM. In this video, we'll be building the settings menu in the currency converter app. So to get started, first we need to locate the settings button. After that, in the settings button, after I specify the text, I need to add a command, and I'll explain all this in a second. Command is equal to settings. After we do that, we'll go back to the top of the code. And before we specify our window over here, root, I'll add a couple spaces and I'll create the settings function. Settings, and for now I'll pass, which means nothing will happen when you call the settings function. So a command does, every time I click on a button, it will activate the function I put here. So in this case, I specified the settings function, which means every time I click the button, it will activate the code that is in the settings function. So first we need to create another window, and this window will open after the settings button has been clicked. So I'll go back to the code and I'll create a variable, settings underscore window, and instead of using TK like we did before, we'll use top level. So top level is a window that sits on another window, which means when we close the first window, when we close root, the second window will close automatically with it because the top level window sits on top of the root window. So in between the parentheses, I'll type in root, which is our main window. Next, I'll add a couple settings to our window. Settings.title, and I'll add a title of settings. Next, I'll add a window size. So settings underscore window.geometry, and I'll set it to 300 on 200. So this is basically the settings window. Next is to add elements to the window. So the first element we'll add is the drop-down menu where the user can select how much decimal points he wants in the output. So first I'll create a label, and I'll place it on the settings window, and I'll set the text to decimal places, and I'll pack it to the screen with a pad X of 50 and an anchor to west. So before we move on to the next element, I want to make the font size bigger. So I'll type in font, and I'll set the font to none, and the font size to 15. So after that, we need to create our drop-down menu. So I'll create a variable, decimal underscore drop-down, and I'll create a option menu like we did in the previous tutorial. I'll place it on the settings window, and I'll add a comma and asterisk, and the name of the variable we'll be creating in a second. So decimal points, and over the option menu I'll add a list named decimal points, and in the list I'll add 5 options of decimal points that you can select from in a string format. Okay, after that we need to pack it to the screen, so I'll call the drop-down variable decimal dropdown.pack, and I'll add a pad X of 50, a pad Y of 10, and an anchor to west. Next, we'll create the background color button, and when the button is clicked, it will open a color picker where the user can select the color he wants to use. So first we'll create a label, and we'll place it on the settings window, and I'll set the text to change background color. Okay, after that I'll add a font size, and I'll set it to 15, and I'll pack it to the screen with a pad X of 50 and an anchor to west. So after that we need to create the background color button. So So bg underscore color is equal to button, and we'll place it on the settings window with a text of pick color, and we'll pack it to the screen with a pad X of 50, a pad Y of 10, and an anchor set to west. Now we need to pack the button to the screen, so bg underscore color dot pack, and I'll add a pad X of 50, a pad Y of 10, and an anchor set to west. Now we need to create the functionality so when the button is clicked, it will open the color picker. So step 1 is to go up here to the top of the code and to add another line under where we import tkinter, and we need to type in from tkinter import color chooser. After we do that, we need to go to the top of the settings function, and we'll create a function that will be activated when the button is clicked. So let me show you. So we'll create a function, we'll name it pick underscore color, and in the pick color function, we'll add a variable called color, and it will be equal to color chooser, and this is what we imported up here, dot ask color, and parentheses, title is equal to select color. And in this example, we'll just print the color after the user selects it. Print color. Okay, so after we do that, we need to go back to the button and we'll add a command, same way we did before. Command is equal to pick underscore color. So let's test out the code. I'll run the code, click on the settings button, and I'll click on the pick color button. So as you see, you get this color picker where you can pick any color you want. And in this example, it will just print the color in a RGB or hex value. Next, I want to create the offline mode checkbox. So I'll do that by creating a label. I'll place it on the settings window with a text of offline mode, and I'll set a font size to 15, and I'll pack it to the screen with a pad X of 50 and a pad Y of 10, and anchor set to west. Okay, so now we'll create the checkbox. So we'll create a variable, offline underscore mode, and we'll use tkinter's check button. So check button. And in this check button, we'll place it on settings window. We'll set the text to offline mode, and we'll pack it to the screen, offline mode.pack, with a pad X of 50 and an anchor set to west. So last step is to create the save button, which will save our setting changes. So we'll create a button, we'll place it on the settings window, we'll set the text to save, and I'll add a command and I'll set it to save, and we need to create the save function in a second. And I'll pack this to the screen, and I'll put a pad Y of 20, a pad X of 50, and an anchor set to west. Okay, so now up here in the code, under the pick color function, we'll create another function, def save, and for now we'll type in pass, which means nothing will happen when you click on the save button. So let's run our code. And as you see, when I click on the settings button, this new window appears, and you get the option to select from decimal points, you get the option to pick the background color, and you get the option for offline mode. So we need to fix a couple things. We need to extend this window, and I want to add a default choice for decimal points. So we'll go back to the code, and I'll change it from 300 on 200 to 300 on 300. And this will hopefully make our window size better. Next, for us to be able to add a default option in our drop-down menu, we need to use something called a string variable. And I'll explain this in a second. So under the list, we'll create another variable named decimal underscore var, which stands for variable, is equal to string var, capital S and capital V, and parentheses. After that, in our option menu, in between where we specify our window and the list, we'll add another comma and the variable with our string variable. So decimal underscore var. So basically what a string var does, it's basically how tkinter stores our data. So if the user selects number 2 as is option in the option menu, this string variable or this decimal var variable will return the number 2. So after we create a string variable, we want to set a default option to the string variable. So same way the string variable can add data to itself, it can also set default data. So we'll do that by calling the variable decimal underscore var dot set parentheses, and in the parentheses I'll put our default value, and in my example I'll put in number 2. So now if we run the code, as you see by default the option is selected to 2, and the user could change it as much as he wants. So this is basically how to create the settings menu in our currency converter app. Please don't forget to subscribe to stay updated for part 3 and future parts on this channel. Thanks for watching.